Each thing that you want to do, you have to know the hukum. And that's a ayn on you. So if you're going to, but it's not, you don't have to know the ahkam of things that you're not doing. That's a fard kifaya. Some people have to know that. But you yourself only are obligated to know what you're going to do. You have to know the hukum. Television has a hukum. Many of the early ulama just considered it haram, period. When it first showed up, most of the ulama said it was haram, adatul lahwin. Some of them said, no, look, we can do Quran, put Quran on it, so there's bath, it's a silah, dhatu haddain. It has good and evil. You can use it for good, for evil. We know now, we have a lot of information. It's a low-grade addiction, we know that. People get addicted to it. That's why people go into technology withdrawal now. Like people here, they can't leave those little cell phones. They're gonna check my Facebook, see what the latest fitna is, what the latest tweet is, things like that. People can't do that. At least in Ramadan, you should try to give up all that stuff just to see what it's like. Because people have forgotten how to do that. So anything you're going to do, you have to know the hukum. That's a fard ayn. And then he talks about, as for the i'tiqadat wal a'mal al-qulub, yajibu ilmuha bihasab al-khawatir. So you have to know based on your thoughts, the khawatir. If you have doubtful thoughts, you have to address those doubts to have rad, a refutation against them. And that involves going to scholars or learning your deen better, because doubt is not, right? You can't have doubt in your iman. You can have a khawatir occur to you. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says, وَمَا يُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ الشَّيْطَانُ وَالْقَلْبُ يَأْبَاهُ هُوَ الْإِيمَانُ. What shaitan whispers in your heart and the heart rejects it, that's iman. And one of the Sahaba came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, I find things in myself that I'm ashamed to even say it. He said, Tajidu dhalika, you find that? He said, Naam. He said, Sarih al-iman, pure faith. In other words, that thing that makes you dislike a foul thought or something like that, that's iman. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was saying. And those thoughts are either from nafs or shaitan. And that's why we differentiate, because a lot of people, in some traditions, they get very guilty about thoughts and they obsess about them. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says, فَلَا تُحَاجِجْ عَنْدَهُ اللَّعِينَ. Don't obsess. Don't fight those thoughts. فَإِنَّهُ يَزِيدُهُ تَمْكِينًا. It just increases him in his power over you. Just let the thought go. Don't obsess about the thought. Just let it go. It's not you. So you shouldn't have that self-disgust. It's part of the ibtila of being human, is that there's a dark force that has the ability to do waswasa, and you fight that, and over time those waswasa will become less and less, and for people that do the tazkiyah, they leave them. And that's why yuhasib al-khatar ala al-qistasi, right? Yuhasir al-nafs ala al-anfasi wa yazin al-khatara bil-qistasi. That there's a point that you get to where you're doing muhasabah of your nafs, your nafas, your breath. Like the big salihin, they're aware of their breaths. And so they'll do dhikr constantly. I mean, this is a high maqam. But they also are able to do muhasabat al-khawatir. They can stop thoughts. Tafakkur, one of the meanings of tafakkur is to stop thoughts. It can mean to al-ijtihad fil fikr. Tafakkur is an interesting wazn in sarf. Because one of the meanings is to, yatafakkaru means to think deeply, fi kharq as-samawati wal-ard, and all these things. To struggle with fikr, to think about these things, to ponder them. But tafakkur also means to avoid thought. Tafa'ul is for ijtinab as well as takalluf. So it means also to be able to, so part of tafakkur, in order to have pure meditation and reflection, you have to be able to control your thoughts. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ, the first thing he began was tahannuth. Tahannuth is ijtinab al-hinth, is to avoid the distractions. And this is why Ibn Abi Jamrah, in his magisterial work, Bahjatun Nufus, the great Andalusian and then Egyptian scholar, teacher of Ibn al-Hajj al-Abdari, he said that if you look at the Prophet ﷺ in the beginning of his life, his spiritual, I mean his whole life was spiritual, but in the beginning of his serious spiritual, his preparation for transition into prophecy, he had to go to the mountain. Khadija used to meet him and give him food, but he had to be alone in the cave. But he said at the end of his life, he's praying with his beautiful young wife, and when he needed to go into sajda, he would give her a tap on her leg so she could pull her legs up. Absolute, no distraction. Somebody completely in pure presence with his Lord. So he didn't need to pull away. And this is the Prophet ﷺ has his own suluk with his Lord. I mean, he was ma'soom and he had all of the perfect qualities and characteristics, but he has his own journey. The Isra is part of his journey, the Mi'raj is part of his journey. He has his own journey to Allah. He's salik. Amana rasulu bima unzila ilayhi. He's a believer as well. It's not just us. We believe in him, but he believes in him also. And when he heard the Jews give prophecy about him, he used to say, Amantu billah wa ashhadu anni rasulullah. I believe in God and I bear witness that I'm a messenger of God. He had to believe it. And this is his thiqah in his own self, which initially was very difficult for him because he was so humble. He couldn't believe that he would be worthy of this. Like Aisha, when the revelation came about her, she said, Kuntu ahqiru nafsi. I deem myself too insignificant to have revelation come to me about this. And so he says that it's clear in all of these things that the Prophet ﷺ mentions, when he uses alif lam bil ilm al mu'arraf, like طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم هو علم العمل الذي هو مشهور الوجوب على المسلمين لا غير. It's the actions that everybody knows Muslims are obliged to do it at the time they're obliged to do it. So that's, you have the i'tiqad. Once you understand that, then the fard ayn involves action. So you have the i'tiqad, the belief, and then you have fi'l and tark. And that's the basis of our knowledge. It's really important to understand that. And then so that's fard ayn, that you know the hukm of whatever it is you're going to do after you know your Lord. And knowing your Lord, if you understand قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ صَمَدٌ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, those are the 8 things تنفي الكفر الثمانية. Those are 8 things in there that negate they negate the 8 types of kufr. The first is قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, التعدد, that your Lord is more than one, or that he's a composite. So it negates التعدد وتركب, tarkib. It negates that he is more than one, or that he's made up of parts. So he's simple. Allah is infinite. There's no composite to God. That's the first. And then Allahu Samad, that God has no naqs or aib. He's not in want of anything, and he has no deficiency in his nature. So he needs nothing. He's not in want of anything. There's no lam yalid wa lam yulad, negates illa wal ma'luliyah, cause and effect. He didn't cause anything in a causal sense. He created the world, that's from him, but not in a cause effect like this. I make a noise with that, so it has to be connected to the thing in order to affect it. There's no causal relationship with God like that. إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَنْ يَقُولَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونُ. It's not فَيَكُن, it's not jawab shart, that fa, like that, فَيَكُونُ, right? Because it's not like a cause and effect type. So it negates illa wal ma'luliyah, cause and effect in that way. It doesn't mean Allah created creation, ex nihilo, out of nothing. And then لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ شَبِيهٌ وَالنَّظِيرٌ, any likeness or any opposite. So those 8 things, if you understand about God, and then لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ, nothing like him, كُلُّ مَا خَطَرَ بِبَالِكَ اللَّهُ خِلَافُ ذَلِكَ, everything that occurs to your mind, God is other than that. We have the via negativa, that you know God through His negative attributes. Because we can't know His essence, but we can know Him as He manifested Himself through attributes in creation. We can know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rahmah, that rain embodied in good rain, the love of a mother for her child. The Prophet ﷺ pointed to the foal who lifted its hoof not to harm the mare, lifted the hoof not to harm the foal. And the Prophet said, you see how that foal, he said, Allah is more merciful to His creation. He saw a woman giving suckle to her child. He said, and he pointed that out. He's giving them ibrah. He said, do you think that woman would throw her baby into the fire? And they said, no, hasha, never. He said, Allah is more merciful to His creation than that woman to her baby. He's teaching them the attributes of Allah, but the essence unknowable. We can't know the essence. And even the attributes, we can only know them through amthal, analogies. In reality, we can't know them. There's no way we can know them. And then if you know the prophets are true, and you know the 25 prophets that came in the Quran, and then multitudes of others that we don't know, their names Allah didn't tell us, and then you know the ma'ad, that's aqidah. It's not difficult. What you learn here, inshallah, it will suffice you. If you really understand it, what you learn, is Sidi Omar teaching, Qurayshi? What you learn with him, inshallah, during this time should fulfill your fard ayn. And so, once you learn that, you move on to the furu', to learn the furu'. أهمها عقائد ثم فروع وآدة بها الشروع. تصوف وآدة بها الشروع. The most important, this is the traditional tartib of knowledge. The most important is aqidah, to learn it. And people have criticized me for saying something that we're obsessed with aqidah, and it's not what I meant. Aqidah is very important, and ulama have to learn it. But there's people that said, I said in a talk somewhere one time, long time ago, that we have this sickness. I'm talking about people that they just go around checking everybody's aqidah. There's a sickness. And that aqidah in our tradition is not difficult for the common believer. It's not a hard thing, and you can teach it in a relatively short time. To learn and master our tradition, that's a whole other reality. And we need people to do that. But for that, it's enough. And then you move on. So now, and then furu', which is the branches of fiqh to learn. After you learn aqidah, you learn your 5 pillars. And then if you're going to get married, rights and responsibilities. This is fard ayn. If you're going to get married, you have to learn how to treat your wife. What rights she has. The madhabs differ. But some of the madhabs, if she's of a certain socioeconomic status, she's entitled to a helper that you have to pay for in the house. That some of the fuqaha say she has khidma batina, that she needs to help in the house. Others say no, you have to pay her to do the work. So she doesn't have to cook, she doesn't have to do the laundry, she doesn't have to do any of those things, clean the house, none of it. There's fuqaha that said that. They said you have to pay her. If she wants to do it out of her virtue and fadl and rahmah and love and care and concern, then alhamdulillah, it's good. You're lucky. Then you have to, be nice to her, and you're so wonderful, right? Bring her gul every once in a while, the rose. You have to know that. And then other madhabs say, no, she has khidma batina, she needs to serve. So she needs to know that also. But if she's in a madhab that doesn't serve, and you have a madhab that serves, she's entitled, because that's her madhab. So she needs to learn too, the fiqh, so she can remind him of her rights. And in a healthy marriage, all these divorces out there that are happening, many of them are, first of all, no patience, because marriage is difficult, right? I mean, I saw an interview with a lady who was married to a famous entertainer who was notorious for doing a lot of bad things, but he asked her, what's the secret of a long marriage? And she said, you don't get divorced. Which is a pretty good answer. Because marriages are going to have ups and downs. But if you really love somebody, you're going to be patient with them, they're going to be patient with you, and it's a two-way street. But you get over those things, and there's rewards on the other side. There's rewards if you're patient. So now he's going to go into the fard kifaya. And he said, there's ulum that are shar'iyya and غير shar'iyya. فالعلوم التي ليست شرعية تنقسم إلى ما هو محمود وإلى ما هو مذموم وإلى ما هو مباح. So you have praiseworthy, blameworthy, and then permissible things to learn. فالمحمود أن ترتبط به مصالح الدنيا, that those beneficial things in the world are connected to كالطب, like medicine, والحساب, and that traditionally would have been like mathematics. And then ذلك ينقسم إلى ما هو فرض كفاية وإلى ما هو فضيلة وليس بفريضة. And then that also is divided into what is فرض كفاية. In other words, فرض عين, everybody has to learn it. فرض كفاية, there has to be enough people that know it to suffice your community. That's the difference. And so he says, as for فرض كفاية, هو كل علم لا يستغنى عنه في قوام أمور الدنيا. It's every knowledge that without it you can't fulfill the needs of a society in this world. And then he says, كالطب, like medicine, إذ هو ضروري في حاجة بقاء الأبدان. It's necessary in order to maintain the bodies. وكالحساب, because you need mathematics, arithmetic, because it's necessary for commercial transactions, for division of inheritance and wills. وهذه العلوم التي لو خلا البلد عمن يقوم بها حرج أهل البلد. These are the knowledges that if a city loses them, it becomes very difficult for a society to thrive in it. It becomes very constrained. وإذا قام بها واحد كفى وسقط الفرض عن الآخرين. And if somebody's doing it, then the fard is fulfilled for the others. And that's why you have to respect these people, because they're actually, if people are making da'wah, you should support du'at, because they're removing the sin of our community that's not calling other people to Islam. You have to support people that are doing fard kifaya. It's very important. Either support them by, if you have Muslim doctors and they're good doctors, then you have to go to them before you go to another, because you're supporting the community, people that are fulfilling that fard. If they're smart, they'll have a niyyah to fulfill that fard. You should, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are by intentions, and so they should fulfill that. Now, then he says also, فَلَا يُتَعَجَّبْ مِنْ قَوْلِنَا إِنَّ الطِّبَّ وَالْحِسَابَ مِنْ فُرُوضِ الْكِفَايَةِ. Don't be amazed. Don't be surprised that I'm saying arithmetic and medicine are part of our Sharia sciences, that we're fulfilling religious obligations. فإن أصول الصناعات أيضا من فروض الكفاية, because even the most important foundational activities are also these, like agriculture and textiles and politics, بل الحجامة, even cupping. فإنه لو خلى البلد عن الحجام تسارع الهلاك إليهم. If people lose a hajjam, they're on their way out. And the Prophet was very concerned about hijama. Like, alhamdulillah, I go to the Hijaz usually once a year. I always get hijama. You should do at least once a year, the hijama. But you have to find somebody that knows how to do it. It's not hard to do, but there should be people qualified. Preferably our doctors should learn it. Dr. Yang knows hijama because they do it in China. But hijama, the Prophet in the hadith at the Isra, every single Prophet that he was told at every heaven, remind your ummah about hijama. SubhanAllah. Now people, no concern. These are sunan that have just disappeared. Prophet got hijama on certain points because it's done, the best times are certain times of the year. But he did it consistently. If you look, blood pressure, all these problems, they use hijama in Northern European countries to treat blood pressure. They don't give them all these pills that they use in America to make money. Because if you do hijama, if you do it properly, the blood pressure will go down. So all these poor people on blood pressure pills, they could just be getting the hijama. This is a real science. But unfortunately, it's been relegated to folklore, and a lot of people, they do a 2-week course or something like that. It needs more than that. But it's not difficult to learn. And the best people to practice it are the physicians, because they know they'll do it with proper procedure, sanitation, things like that. I mean, I've done it different ways. It's very strong. Sometimes you'll almost pass out. because it's strong. But I had one time I did it in Medina. I was so sick, and I went and got bled, and with the cupping, and I just felt incredible after it. I just felt amazing. So that was a real. I said, got to keep doing this. Sheikh Abdullah gets it regular. Abdullah bin Bayya? Yeah, so. But that's what he says. If you get rid of the hajjam, you're on your way out. تسارع الهلاك إليهم وحرجوا بتعريضهم أنفسهم للهلاك. And then, that's difficult if they expose themselves to destruction. فإن الذي أنزل الداء أنزل الدواء. The one who sent down sickness also sent down a cure. وأرشد إلى استعماري. And he told us to do this as a preventative. It's a preventative. Covering food. People wonder where all these diseases come from. The Prophet ﷺ said, cover your food because in a certain time every year the disease comes down into the world and it hits open food. People don't, these are traditional things. If you look at your grandma, right, from Hyderabad or Calcutta or wherever she was from, right, they just do it. They don't know why they do it. They always tell you, you have to cover the food, right? These are old, I once had a patient when I was in the hospital. I was taking care of this lady. She was in her 90s, and this was in the early 90s. She was in her 90s, so she was like born around the turn of the century. She was Iraqi Christian, and she even told me a slogan they had at that time: Sultan Rashad huwa alladhi kharrab al-bilad. Like she remembered a slogan from the Ottoman Empire. But she told me that she came to America in the 20s because she said when the British took over Iraq, they told, you're Christians, you're not like them, they're Muslim, and they're Jews. And she said her father said it's time to go because they're going to separate the people. She said that we weren't like that. But I remember she said, will they let me bring my cupping tools in? She said, I want to get cupped. Wallah, I swear to God, it's a true story. Christian, Iraqi Christian, poor people now. May Allah give them refuge. May Allah wake up these Muslims to protect them. They're people of dhimma, of responsibility. Muslims are responsible for them. They're people that are a sacred trust from God. They've been there over, like they were talking 2,000 years almost. And horrible what they're doing to these people. But she said, "Di hikma Arabiya, ma biyafhamha hadol." She said, this is like an Arabic wisdom. They don't understand it, these Western people. Christian Iraqi. And then he says, as for fadila, not farida, فَتَعَمُّقْ فِي دَقَائِقَ الْحِسَابِ. To get really understand mathematics, وَحَقَائِقَ الطِّبْ, to get deeply into medicine, وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ مِمَّا يُسْتَغْنَ عَنْهُ. You can do without it. Research and development is a good thing. It's not, what he's saying, these things are virtuous things to continue these things. And it could be argued now these things are fard kifaya, because at that time, tib was more of a dhanni science. Like for instance, in Maliki fiqh, the fuqaha say the man has to pay for the woman's, her henna and her cosmetics, but he doesn't have to pay for her medicine. Now, if you look at the reasoning behind it, it's not, he can let her get sick, but she has to stay beautiful for him. That wasn't the point. The point was that medicine in those days was very dhanni, a lot of the things that they took. So they looked at it like that. But if the medicine will definitely benefit the person, it's an obligation to do that. And so then he says, أما المذموم فعلم السحر وطلسمات or طلسمات. These are talismans, and so magic and talismans. These are some things that people do, like jadoo. They call it, if you're from South Asia, they call it jadoo. Jadoo, yeah, jadoo. Urdu nahi ma'lum hai. Tora, yeah. What did they say? Kya ulu hai. No, ulu hai. क्या उलू है नहीं मालूम क्या मुश्किल है. You just put hey after any Arabic word And you might get it right. It's like Spanish, you first try sion, like education, So in Urdu, just try Arabic, musibat hai. I once said to a Urdu speaker, yeah, that's Arabic. I said, yeah, but Arabs say that, musibah. He said, oh, they must have got it from Urdu. So, jadoo, they do jadoo. It's haram to do that. But unfortunately, some Muslims do that. They do it in some Arab countries. They have this magic that they do, like to separate men from women. They put things in their food, if you take another wife, they put something in, make them impotent and things. This is things that people do. Very strange, but this is the world we're living in. So he says that's haram, obviously, but madmoom, it's blameworthy. Ilmu sha'bada or sha'wada. Sha'bada is like sleight of hand. It's madmoom to learn sleight of hand tricks, do those type things, blameworthy, because it's shabihun bis-sihr. There's a khilaf about magic, but I very much incline towards the fact that it's real. It's not, there's a khilaf about some of the ulama. The more rationalists said that it's not. But if you study magic, and not study it to do, but read about it and read about its history. And أما المباح علم بالأشعار, poetry التي لا سخف فيها, like it's not stupid poetry. وتواريخ الأخبار, also history, وما يجري مجراه. It's mubah, but it also, history is very important, and in some ways a community has to know history. Certain histories are fard kifaya. People have to know seerah, they have to know, and then there's certain things all of us should know about seerah. It's mustahab for every Muslim to know certain things. And the Prophet loved poetry, and his house was a house of adab. It was a house of literature. Read the hadith of Zara' and just be amazed at the level of literature that was in his house. But to spend too much time on these things, to where that's your life, which some people make it, that's wrong. And then he says, as for the ulum al-shar'iyya, هي المقصودة بالبيان وهي محمودة كلها, all of it is good. ولكن قد يلتبس بها ما يظن أنها شرعية وتكون مذمومة فتقسم إلى المحمودة والمذمومة. So there's some ambiguity here, and he wants to clarify. All right. So أما المحمودة فلها أصول وفروع ومقدمات ومتممات. So the praiseworthy, there's usul, furu', muqaddimat, mutammimat. There's things that you need to learn as introductory or propedeutic sciences, and then mutammimat, those sciences that complete things, and he gives those 4 types. And then he says the first is usul, and that's the book of Allah, the sunnah of the Prophet, the ijma' of the ummah, and the athar al-sahaba. So those are the usul. Now we would say it's qiyas generally is what they would put as the 4th one. And he was somebody who believed in qiyas. Ijma', and then so that's knowing the usul. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi, he said, in order to interpret the Quran, you have to know certain sciences. You have to know tafsir. You have to know qira'at. You have to know the ahkam. So you have to know what the words mean. And based on the language and based on what's been said about them by the Prophet, if there are, and Sahaba also. You have to know qira'at, because there's different riwayat that are sound, like tabayyanu, tathabbatu. Those are 2 sound variants. You have to know also ahkam. You have to know the fiqh. You have to know usul al-din. You have to know ilm al-kalam, theology. You have to know usul al-fiqh. You have to know the foundations of deriving ahkam from them. You have to know naskh, abrogating, nasikh wal mansukh, what's abrogated, what's abrogating. You have to know qasas. You have to know the stories of the prophets. You have to know tasawwuf. He includes that as one of the sciences that you're supposed to know in order to know that. And then you have to know hadith, ilm al-hadith. And these, you should know these 2, at least a moderate level of knowledge. And then he said that you have to know lugha, which is basically it's vocabulary. You have to know the vocabulary of the Quran and of the Arabic language. And then you have to know nahu and bayan. He gives those knowledges as these are knowledges that you should not make tafsir if you don't have knowledge of these. And nahu would be considered what we call now grammar and morphology. So grammar and syntax and morphology. And then bayan is another word that they use for balagha. Bayan is the most important branch of balagha, which deals with metaphors and similes and metonymies and analogies. And then you have so it's actually bayan, ma'ani, and badi'. Those are the three. And then the ma'ani deal with different types of sentences, and badi' deals with the ornamentations of the words, how we embellish rhetorical figures, what we call tropes and figures in Western. And then the muqaddimats, so he talks about the ulum. Traditionally, we divide it into aliyah, asliya, and far'iyah. Ulum al-aliyah are the tools of learning. What we would call the trivium was very important, even though there's more than three. I mean, there's actually several sciences of language, but they're fundamentally, the most important ones were grammar, rhetoric, logic, and rhetoric. So that's the trivium that our tradition focused on. But grammar included prosody, it included literature, it included khat, bayan, it included a lot of things. And muhadara, ilm al-muhadara, which is a dead knowledge. And then logic, mantiq, which is the basic three functions of the mind, tasawwurat, tasdiqat, and aqisa, and which is the conceptualization of things, propositions about things, and then demonstrative, inductive, and deductive reasoning, primarily deductive. So that was, and then balagha would teach you how language works, so that you could determine what was literal, what was figurative. You wouldn't make the type mistakes that people make now about aqidah and things like this, because we don't believe Allah moves. It's impossible for God to move because you have to have space to move in. And so this whole idea of hadiths that have some type of movement, we cannot take those literally, but we don't deny that he called something nuzul and he does that. We don't deny that, he does that, but it's not our nuzul. It's not moving from one point to another, because that would mean he's contained in space, which means he has limits, and hashahu, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also majaz al-mursal, which is a big problem with our youth, some of these shabab. You know, they say these things about itlaq al-sabab ala al-musabbib, you know. You can call the effect by the cause. It's not shirk. Majaz mursal. This causes a lot of confusion. Shaykh Ahmed Karadari, who was a great teacher of Shaykh Abdullah al-Qadi, who I had the good fortune of meeting, and he was a master of the ulum al-ala, you know, these tools of learning. And he once, somebody came to argue with him after a khutbah, and he said a sentence. He said, "Tell me what that is in balagha." And this guy, he said, "I don't know. I never studied balagha." He said, "Tayyib, go study balagha, come back to me and we'll talk." You know. In other words, I can't talk to you about, you won't understand. So, my goodness. It's a big book. We'll get through it, inshallah. Bi-idhnillah. I mean, we have to make dua for a miracle, but inshallah we'll get through it. Sorry, can you translate? Madhmoom is blameworthy. Mubah is permissible. Mustahab is encouraged, highly recommended. And these are fiqh terms that you learn when you study fiqh. Everything in our religion has 5 rulings. Everything. And some will add 7 because they add the fasid and sahih. So you have the first is fard, which is also called wajib, although the Hanafis distinguish, and so do the Malikis. If you read Ibn Abi Zayd in the Risala, he uses wajib for sunnah sometimes. But generally those two are the same, fard wajib. So that's the obligatory. And then you have mustahab, which is also called mandub. A lot of people refer to this as sunnah also, and sometimes as nafila. All those are used by, they have distinctions in the tradition generally, but Muslims use them like I need to pray sunnah. It's actually nafila. Unless it's there's certain prayers that are considered sunnah, because if you didn't continually do it, it's not sunnah. And then there's confirmed sunnah, sunnah mu'akkada, and nafila. Nafila is a lighter ruling. And the Malikis have raghiba, which is another category that they put in here, raghiba, which are the 2 rakats at Fajr. And then you have mubah, which is permissible, right? So this is permissible. And then you have makruh, which is disliked, discouraged. And then you have haram. So every single thing is in one of these 5 categories. So this is disliked or discouraged. There's different words you'll see in English. Not recommended. And then this is prohibited or prescribed, proscribed. So those are the 5. And then some will add the fasid and sahih, which relates to contracts and things like that. So a contract can be fasid or sahih, aqd sahih, aqd fasid, right? And then you get it, there's fasakh, there's other terms that are used. So those are all the ahkam. So anything you do is going to fall under one of those ahkam. And the ulama differ on some of them. Some, they'll say something's makruh. They have the karahiyya tanzihiyya, tahrimiyya. The Hanafis will tend to, some makruh is really like haram, but the early ulama did not like to say haram. So they tended to say akrahu dharika, but it's karahiyya tahrimiyya. They really meant it's haram. But they were very, very wary about using haram because it's a very heavy word. And only Allah can make haram, and His Messenger by extension, majaz, mursal. So, what is the difference between angelic spiritual experience and demonic experience? Well, one's a good one and the other's a negative one. But, people have what they think are spiritual experiences, but they're actually demonic experiences, and they can feel very expansive. The Catholics have a law called the law of discernment, in which they say that a true spiritual experience will often have constriction initially and then expansion, whereas a demonic has expansion first and then constriction. And according to that law of discernment, the Prophet ﷺ, his initial contraction was actually an indication, according to the Catholics, I'm just saying, that was an angelic and not a demonic, because they would say that the devil will make you feel really good, right? النار بالشهوات. The hell is surrounded by things we like. Is fard kifayat is defined as knowledge which some people need to know to suffice one's community. What does community mean here? Community, it's here, it would be like every community tradition was supposed to have a muwaqqit, which is the timekeeper. They know the times of prayer. They go out and look at the moon, right? That was traditionally considered part of our wajibat, fard kifaya. Now, with the international communications that people have, some of these things are fulfilled by But there still has to be people that know it, but maybe not like it used to be. But traditionally, every city had a mu'aqqat. Every city. Several, usually. Fez still has one. In fact, Niaz, I think, left, but Niaz knows him. He just gave me salam from the mu'aqqat of Fez, who I visited several times. Very interesting man. What two types of shirk did the last ayah of Surah Ikhlas negate? Shabih wa nadir, that Allah has any likeness or opposite. You know, like the idea of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, Manichaeism believes in like a dark God and a light God, or that there's goddesses and multiple gods, things like that. Okay, so is it possible for a non-Muslim to fulfill fard kifaya? Technically, no. I mean, obviously, they fulfill the needs of the community, but one of the things that Imam Ghazali says in this chapter is that it's disgraceful we have so many fuqaha and we leave the medicine to the Christians. He said, why aren't other people focusing on fulfilling that fard kifaya? And Imam al-Ma'ziri, one of the great Tunisian scholars, teacher at the Zaytuna, he went to a physician from the Ahl al-Kitab and he said to him, you know, some people in my faith would consider it a qurba, like to get near to God, to kill you, because you're such a proof for this religion, for your religion. He said, so it amazes me Muslims come to us to get treated when they really shouldn't feel safe from us. And he was telling him that. And Maziri mentions this. And he said, I determined that I would master medicine after that. So he went and learned medicine just to fulfill that. And Imam Subki mentions that. He said, why are we leaving medicine to the Christians in Syria? He mentioned that in Mu'id al-Ni'am, wa Mubid al-Niqam. He says, we have all these Christian doctors. Why aren't there more Muslim doctors? Now, arguably, there's more Muslim doctors than we need. No offense to any doctors. We need more ER doctors, though. Yeah, that's a useful medicine, ER medicine. Any other questions? Any answers? Any solutions? Alaikum salam.
Does ma'lum min ad-din bid-darura change with time? If so, is it like more?
That's a good question. I think that's a really valid question. It's definitely problematic because there was a lot, knowledge was more, in some ways more widespread in the ummah because there were a lot more learned people. In other ways, one could argue that this is a time because of the mass media. But one of the problems in what I've noticed on when I've gone to the Muslim world and watched ulama on the television, you can be watching one channel and the alim will say one thing, you change the channel, another alim says exact opposite. And one of the things that happened in the Emirates with Dr. Hamdan al-Mazru'i, who's the Mudir of Awqaf there, he said that they started implementing, they had different muftis from different places, but they started only giving Maliki fatwa because he was hearing from people from the Emirates. They were getting opposite fatwas from the same source. And so that was very problematic for them. So they actually consolidated the ifta in the Emirates to the Maliki madhab. Traditionally, that's the way it would have been. People would have followed their madhab, and going to another madhab, there's khilaf about it. I mean, most ulama accept it, talfiq is permissible, as long as you don't do all the easy things from the madhabs. But, and then for darurat, you can do that. But it's a good question. I think there's certain things, like we should know that homosexuality is haram, ma'lum min ad-din daruratan, that the people now, some of these progressive Muslims, quote unquote, that are trying to say that, it's just, you can't do that. It's just simple as that. You cannot change the religion like that to suit your hawa. And Allah warns us about following our ahwa. Homosexuality if somebody has a same-sex attraction, that there are people that have that, obviously, we know that, undeniable. That's a ibtila, it's a tribulation. There are Christians now in that community that instead of doing reparative therapy, they're just saying we're going to stay celibate because they would rather stay Christian, acknowledge the fact that it's prohibited in their faith, and not pursue those appetites. That's an example, and this is a big problem in the West because there's so much push now this is a kind of a litmus test now for people especially in the United States. We're really seeing a lot of that. If you're against this, you're just simply a bigot. They put you in the same category as a racist, and they conflate the civil rights struggle with this struggle. Muslims historically were for the kind of transgender community, they tended to be, and I mean by a true transgender, like somebody who's a hermaphrodite, mukhannath. Muslims were very tolerant. The fiqh books clearly indicate that there are people that do have both male and female qualities, and they have ahkam that are specific to them. They certainly shouldn't be abused or, and that's just wrong, treating human beings cruelly and things like that. In Mauritania, you have that community there. They tend to be entertainers very often at weddings and things like that. Pakistan, I know, and India has this also. So historically, if you want to make a documentary and win an Oscar, you could probably do that on the hermaphrodites of the Muslim world. But the idea that marriage is defined in Islam. You can't change. It's very odd in America now. Nobody wants to get married except homosexual people. It's just so weird. I mean, it's really strange. It's inversion. But we can't do that. We don't want to see people killed or it's just wrong. This is the latter days. Prophet ﷺ predicted all these things. We definitely we don't want to see the type things that happen. It's just not right. But our religion is our religion. If they're outside of the religion, they have their own way. Lakum dinukum waliya din. It's their Jannah. They can do whatever they want, really, according to one opinion, which is a very strong opinion. But for us, we have to be consistent on our religion. We shouldn't waffle about these things. It's prohibited, and it's as simple as that. And if you say that it is permissible in the religion, you're outside of the religion. By the very nature of making that statement, you've been excommunicated. According to, that's ijma'. I mean, that's just mujma' alayh. And one of the things one of my teachers told me, Shaykh Bashir Shaqfa, he's a great Syrian scholar. He lives in the Emirates. He was thrown out of Syria many years ago from Hama. But he told me once, he said, just make sure the Muslims in America, they know that if they sin, the door of tawbah is always open. It's always open. It doesn't matter what you've done. It does not matter what